Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the negative speaker, and today I'll be proving to you that white-collar crime is far less serious than blue-collar crime. I agree with the definitions of white and blue-collar crime as stated by Jackson. Furthermore, I define the word serious as something significant or worrying because of possible danger or risk. I'd like to begin my argument with some powerful statistics. Last year, there were 20,677 reported sexual assaults in Australia, 421 victims of homicide, 550 people abducted, and 4,855 recorded armed robberies. Ladies and gentlemen, if the numbers haven't spoken for themselves, I'll convince you of the severity of blue-collar crime compared to white-collar using three main ideas. These are the motivation of blue-collar criminals, consequences of the crimes, and the penalties for committing such offences. Firstly, the seriousness of blue-collar crime is evident through the intention of the person committing the wrongdoing. Majority of blue-collar crimes are carried out by offenders for the purpose of causing harm to another. Examples of such violent crimes include murder, battery, terrorism, and sexual assaults. Compare this with white-collar criminals who are motivated by greed or pressures in their personal or professional lives. These people are aiming to increase their own wealth or status and are often able to act unethically on the assumption that there are no direct sufferers as a result of their behaviour. White-collar criminals commit unlawful acts to benefit themselves and not to directly impair a single victim or group of victims, as is the case with blue-collar crime. White-collar is much less serious because intention to harm, physically or otherwise, is not a motivator for the actions. An obvious reason why white-collar crimes are less serious than blue-collar are the consequences of the two types of misconduct. At absolute worst, for example terrorism, thousands of lives will be lost in the process of committing a blue-collar crime. Whereas although suicide is a common outcome for those caught up in unethical corporate behaviour, loss of wealth in the case of most white-collar crimes cannot be compared to the loss of a person's life. Blue-collar consequences are immediate and personal in nature, while, as Jackson pointed out, the crimes against white-collar victims can go unnoticed for years. This serves as a further indication of the severity of blue-collar when compared with white-collar misconducts. The physical and mental scarring of a victim of conventional crime is far more serious than the financial impairment of the company and its shareholders as a sufferer of white-collar crime. The final argument I'll make is that the punishment fits the crime. The most severe forms of blue-collar crime, such as murder or rape, in most cases incur a life or at least a significant jail sentence. However, it's common for the perpetrators of white-collar crimes to have much shorter prison sentences accompanied by fines, if they're required to serve time at all. To illustrate, Jay Jones, who was found guilty of defrauding investors for somewhere around $1 billion, served 5 years in prison for his unlawful behaviour. This is proof that the judicial system in Australia perceives blue-collar crime as being much more serious and worthy of longer imprisonment than white-collar crimes, which on average carry a lesser jail term. I strongly believe that the perception of whether white-collar or blue-collar crimes are more serious is influenced by cultural values. In many third-world countries where even government corruption is prominent, white-collar crimes and acts such as bribery are seen as acceptable and are not penalised as heavily as they are in Australia, if at all. By the same token, blue-collar crimes in some foreign countries are met with much harsher penalties than they would be if they occurred here. An example of this is the way Indonesians view drug-related crimes, where the death penalty is often a consequence for drug smugglers, as opposed to serving jail time for a similar crime in Australia. The widely varying penalties serve as an indication of the way different cultures perceive the seriousness of white versus blue-collar crimes. To rebut what the affirmative speaker stated about the limited number of victims in blue-collar crimes, in its most severe form, blue-collar crimes such as terrorism have as many, if not more, victims than white-collar crimes, and the impacts and consequences for the victims are much more severe than a decrease in wealth. These types of misconducts absolutely do affect the wider community, despite the consequences of blue-collar crimes being more direct nature. He spoke of the lenience of the judicial system in Australia in regard to white-collar crimes, which further validates my point about the punishment fitting the crime. Perpetrators of white-collar crimes receive lesser prison sentences as they do not pose a threat to the general public, hence their crimes could be said to be less serious. To conclude, in saying that white-collar crimes are less serious than blue-collar crimes, I'll return to the definition of the word serious. Worrying because of possible danger. There is nothing more dangerous than a blue-collar crime, which often results in mental damage, death, or serious injury, as opposed to the non-violent white-collar crimes, as argued by the affirmative speaker. The obvious intent to harm, as well as the severity of the outcomes, are much harsher penalties awarded to the offenders, serves as all the proof one needs that blue collar crime is far more serious than white collar crime.